It's an almost pervasive need. The idea that there's some invisible power controlling the world and we humans are but cogs in a machine simulation that has us enslaved. If true, that means Mr. Smith has us by the proverbials and that you are a veritable Mr. Anderson, or maybe Ms. Anderson. But let's not take this too literally. Yet, could the Matrix be true in some kind of figurative sense? Hello, I'm Marcus T. Anthony, and I'm an academic and futurist, associate professor of foresight and strategy. And fortunately, I work in China, which is, of course, outside the Matrix. In this video, I'm going to ask the question, is the Matrix actually real? And I'm going to argue that there is not merely one Matrix, but two, figuratively speaking, and that it is imperative that we unshackle ourselves from both. Now, after the movie premiered in 1999, the idea of the Matrix became one of the most popular cultural motifs and memes of our times. For example, mystic and author Stuart Wilde often used the Matrix analogy back in the 90s and noughties. David Icke knows all about it, and how the lizard people and the Jews control the world. While Andrew Tate loves to pontificate about the Matrix in between games of chess and teaching his harem the profitability of OnlyFans, which I presume he believes is not part of the simulation. I consider these kind of commentaries on the Matrix to be mostly unhelpful and in general are just memes deployed to optimize social media visibility. The idea of the Matrix is often abused or misappropriated, commonly used as a loose framework to underpin conspiracy thinking. Let's face it, the world is a mighty confusing place, and instead of undergoing the onerous task of researching and thinking deeply about issues, we can just revert to simplistic memes about secret societies, aliens, or the super Jews who control the world. In doing so, we can avoid that distinctly uncomfortable state of not yet knowing, and instead we can collapse that state of ambiguity into certainty. The Matrix did it. Voila! This is a lazy non-explanation. And yet, I do believe that the concept of the Matrix can help us deepen our appreciation of certain systemic and metaphysical issues, but only under two conditions. The first is that we acknowledge that it's only a literary analogy, not literally true. Secondly, we should, wherever possible, clarify where our thinking potentially diverges from the idea of the Matrix as seen in the movie. If these two conditions are met, we might then proceed with some intelligent sense-making. If either or both of these conditions are missing, we're probably just being intellectually lazy and deluding ourselves, as well as other people. And then the idea of the Matrix becomes dangerous, especially if it instills in people the idea that they're helpless victims and effectively slaves of the machine and have no personal agency. Because we do have potential power within this dynamic, as I shall explain soon. Now let me clarify what I mean when I refer to the idea of the Matrix. Firstly, in line with my first rule, I must clarify that I'm not using the term literally. I don't believe we're in a computer simulation, at least I hope not, nor even that there is some single overriding insidious entity that is controlling the world, pulling our eyes closed as it feeds off us like some greedy, psychopathic leviathan. All institutions, societies, and cultures have gatekeeping systems, so that's nothing new. But in the digital age, the system has become incredibly complex, and I make no pretenses to having the ultimate understanding of how everything is put together. We're all a bit like the proverbial blind man feeling the elephant. We only get to feel one or two parts of the great beast, hopefully not that part. Nonetheless, I'm going to suggest that there are two domains of the Matrix, as I see it, and most contemporary references to it typically only consider first. So, after very briefly mentioning the first domain, I'm going to go more deeply into the second, the other Matrix. The Matrix, Domain 1. Welcome to the machine. The first domain of the Matrix is the man-made system driven by capitalism, politics, and technology, and increasingly by artificial intelligence. Web 2.0 is an internet structure powered by big tech and advertising revenue, with numerous powerful entities vying for dominance. Unlike the Matrix movie, I don't believe there's a singular controlling entity like Mr. Smith. Various players, including big tech, governments, secret services, billionaires, and private groups manipulate us all covertly, typically presenting themselves as the good guys and while demonizing others. This complex system emerges from the monetization and politicization of everything, with multiple actors striving for power and influence. In popular culture, when we talk about the Matrix, they mostly discuss Domain 1. But I'm just going to leave Domain 1 of the Matrix as fuzzy as that and move on to Domain 2, which is where the real fun begins. The Matrix, Domain 2, the nice bits. Beyond the world of money and machines, Domain 1 of the Matrix, there's a much more ancient matrix, one that has been in place for countless millennia. Remember, the Wachowski brothers released the movie in 1999 when the internet was in its infancy and where there was no such thing as mobile technology. So we know the movie was not about the World Wide Web. No, the story of Neo in the Matrix movie is essentially a spiritual and religious allegory, mirroring journeys like that of Jesus Christ or the Buddha, a journey from ignorance to truth, from unconsciousness to enlightenment. When Neo sees the code through his own eyes at the climax of the movie, he is like the Buddha awakening under the banyan tree, or like Jesus after his 40 days in the desert. The red pill, blue pill test is a little like Satan tempting Jesus. In one of those temptations, Satan offers Jesus all the kingdoms of the world, if only Jesus will worship the devil. And as we all know, Jesus turned down Satan's rather generous offer. In a sense, the blue pill is like that. Morpheus tells Neo that if he chooses the blue pill, then this is where the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. So it's not quite all the world's kingdoms that Neo is being offered, just the blissful ignorance of unconsciousness, of delusion. On the other hand, Morpheus declares that swallowing the red pill will enable Neo to stay in Wonderland, and where Morpheus will show Neo how deep the rabbit hole goes. This is clearly a pivotal moment in the movie where Neo has to decide if he really wants to know the truth, to face the terrible reality of what he has become, a slave who's given his power away to the machines, or to continue to live in a constructed illusion. Because if Neo is going to choose the truth, the comfortable illusion that he believes in, his world, is going to come crashing down. So what I refer to as Domain 2 of the Matrix analogy mirrors the spiritual drama and symbolism in the movie, an archetypal tale that far precedes the digital age, or Andrew Tate's Dancing Girls. This never-ending story has had little to do with technology for almost the entirety of its dramatic existence. For beyond the domain of money and machines, there's a great consciousness structure, full of wisdom and darkness, that we can all tap into. This consciousness structure lies both within and beyond you, and within and beyond the world, and I maintain that by developing your capacity for integrated intelligence, you can learn to tap into it. Another way of saying this is that you can develop a conscious relationship with consciousness itself. Therefore, the difference between Domain 1 and Domain 2 of the Matrix, as I frame it, is that the latter is not deliberately created by people, but is part of an invisible web of consciousness that has evolved over perhaps hundreds of thousands of years, out of the intimate relationship between humanity, nature, and cosmos. And this is an idea that is common to most spiritual and awakening traditions. I maintain that all of space, time, and consciousness itself have non-local properties, and there are conceptions within current science and physics which provide theoretical, if not quite empirical, support for this claim. See my last video, for example. I believe that the future whispers to us, calling us via its unfolding wisdom in a kind of subtle relationship with the present and with our species. So we have the potential to align with that integrated intelligence in each moment, each hour, and each day. And that subtle consciousness does reach out to us if only we stop a moment to listen and to be present with it. Various thinkers have proposed ideas related to this, including Pierre Teilhard de Chardin's noosphere, Carl Jung's collective consciousness, and psychiatrist Stanislav Grof's belief that the human collective mind shapes our evolution. It also echoes the Chinese understanding of the Tao, which translates to English as the way. We humans are invited to honor this subtle calling And to do that, we must learn not to push forward too aggressively or blindly into the future, for we must first listen. And that requires a wisdom journey, a spiritual journey, and ultimately a healing journey. But this power, this wisdom, is subtle. It's fuzzy and often speaks to us via feelings, dreams, and inspirations. And so for the modern mind, like yours and mine, that has been conditioned to exist in a state of agitated dissociation from the body and its intuitive faculties, there is a requirement for unlearning and then relearning. And that relearning is the essence of the spiritual journey. Thus, the Tao doesn't just tell you what to do. It's part of a greater creativity and wisdom that pulls us forward into the myriad possible futures. The Matrix, Domain 2, the dark bits. Now, if you're paying attention, you might have noticed a significant difference between what I've said so far about the Matrix, Domain 2, and the Machiavellian darkness of the machines in the Matrix movie. Yes, I've mostly talked about the good stuff, like expanding wisdom and self-awareness. Well, I've been deliberately putting off the nasty stuff, so as not to scare you too much. For it's true that many people initiating a wisdom journey may often not appreciate that there are also aspects to our collective consciousness structure and to our own psyches that are connected to it that are negative and unpleasant, or just plain terrifying. One of these things is the existence of collective shadows. This is where groups, both small and large, share unconscious, manipulative, and destructive intentions, and those collective imperatives may form a kind of mass field of shadow energy. And here I'm using the word energy in a broad sense, not literal scientific sense. The groups involved can be as small as two individuals unconsciously entangled in a personal drama, right through to major dramas involving entire tribes, nations, and ultimately the entire human race. This darkness is typically driven by repressed trauma, fear, anger, grief, shame, and the human shadow in general. And we're all embedded within this consciousness structure, difficult as it may be to accept that. Such forces can be quite frightening to consider, let alone directly perceive. But unfortunately, it's just part of the deeper reality within which we all exist. And I have to be honest about that based on my 30 years of work in this area. Now, in the movie The Matrix, this dark aspect of the collective is represented by the agents like Mr. Smith, who is able to occupy the body-mind of a person in the Matrix. Remember, they control the simulation, and use that person to enact their agenda for power and control, such as to get to Neo. However, in my understanding of Domain 2, the system is not driven by a conscious force of evil, but mostly by unconscious collective projections. Nonetheless, there are consistencies in my personal understanding, and that's shown in the original Matrix movie. And just like Neo, part of our awakening is to see just how deeply we've become possessed by the darkness, given our power away, and abandoned our authentic selves. Now, what about the idea of being possessed or controlled by the system, which we see in the Matrix movie? The answer is that I think this occurs in all our journeys, all our societies, and part of the journey of awakening is to break free of those shackles without becoming destructive or demonic in the process. So in my view, the rebel phase, where we rebel against our parents and society, is actually necessary and quite healthy, as long as in that rebellion we deepen into conscious relationship with our own shadow and assume responsibility for our own anger, trauma, and pain. And that requires a deep inner journey and a healing journey. It is the shadow that stands between us and the light. We have to look around us and admit the ways in which we've given our power away, and especially how we've not taken responsibility for our own pain. For it is the world and its people that will mirror that back to us. Now, you might be wondering who the hell I am to be making these claims, and where do I get my insights from? Most of my understanding comes from over 3 decades of personal exploration of the human psyche. And a great deal of that has been developed working with other people and groups who've explored these issues at a deep level. You can't learn this stuff from reading books, sitting in a classroom, or partying with the babes. Mr. Tate. Though I've never felt the need to use drugs of any kind, I do note that many people have used psychedelics like LSD or ayahuasca, have come to similar conclusions. So that's how I see the way the real matrix operates, or should I say matrices, as there are two domains. And let me end with an important qualification. Though domains 1 and 2 of the matrix tend to operate separately, one mostly digital and the other via fields of consciousness, I believe that today they are increasingly impacting each other. Because inevitably, ideas, memes, and big news stories that traverse the internet will impact human collective consciousness fields beyond their mere interaction with that technology. And there are people and organizations back there who know how to fuck with our minds, both as individuals and as a society. And those people too are often instead unconsciously within shadow consciousness structures. And as the distinction between natural and artificial intelligence continues to narrow, those two domains will increasingly work in tandem. But remember, that can also be for the greater good. It does not have to be a destructive arrangement. The most noble goal that we can set for our lives is to help transform the system. But first, we must transform ourselves. If you just go out into the world to fight the darkness without doing shadow work, you will likely end up part of it. But that's a subject for another time. The greatest price we pay for becoming embedded within the matrix is that we unconsciously surrender our power to the system and to the shadow. To quote Steve Jobs, we can easily end up wasting our time and living someone else's life, or worse still, fighting someone else's war. The way I frame it in my book, Power and Presence, is that when we give our power away to the system, we betray our authentic selves. And in doing so, we never quite learn who we truly are. In the end, there's no simple way to liberate yourself from the matrix, such as merely eating the red pill and setting yourself free. For even when you see the matrix, that is, see the truth of what you've become, you still have to work within what Morpheus calls the world of the real. They're still chopping wood, still carrying water, as the old Zen aphorism goes. The entire process of deepening our awareness is ongoing. It requires constant vigilant attention, a commitment to wisdom, and the cultivation of the courage to make wise choices. And for all of us, it will require at least some degree of healing, and to heal it, you gotta feel it. Contemplate that as you gaze upon the red and the blue pills before you. See you next time in one of those futures.